Hello, and welcome to this Cleft Lip and Palate Association webinar on the topic of self-confidence and relationships. This resource is the second in our psychoeducational series, learning about and understanding mental health and well-being, and is open to all adults born with a cleft lip and/or palate. This webinar has been funded by the National Lottery Community Fund and is being recorded and will be available for viewing at a later date on our website and YouTube channel. For this reason, cameras have been turned off and microphones are muted. Please update your name if you have not already to just your first name and your initials. So we will start with introductions and a bit of housekeeping, as well as giving a summary of the content. And my name is Anna Mitchell. You might have seen me before. Was born with a cleft lip and palate, and I have been volunteering with CLAPA for about 6 or 7 years now. And today I'm joined by these lovely people. We have Lauren, Catherine, and Becky.
Hello, my name is Lauren Croucher. I'm a trainee clinical psychologist at the Evelina London Cleft Service.
Hi, my name's Catherine Nutt. I'm a clinical psychologist with the North Thames Cleft Team, based at Broomfield Hospital in Chelmsford, where I've been for about 10 years. This is the second webinar I've supported CLAPA with.
Hi, my name's Becky Croft. I'm the Adult Services Coordinator at CLAPA.
Thank you. So some housekeeping for those of you joining us live. Please use the Zoom chat function to speak with a member of CLAPA staff, message Gillian at any point during the webinar. You will see a hello message pop up shortly. And if you have any issues with this, please email adults@clapa.com and we can respond via email. If you are watching live and would like captions for the webinar, please select closed captions by clicking on the 3 dots section at the bottom of your screen. If you have any comments or questions throughout the webinar, please put these in the chat and we can respond to them at the end. It might be helpful to have a pen and piece of paper in case there's anything which you hear which you might want to write down. We will send out a feedback form at the end via email after the webinar this evening, and please do complete this. We would really welcome any feedback to help us improve for future events. If you find any of the content covered difficult or distressing, please contact CLAPA staff via the chat box or email adults@clapa.com for support. We will be sharing links at the end of the webinar to signpost to support and useful information. And this will be included in the post-webinar email as well. You can also access the Cleft Clinical Psychology team in your local NHS Cleft team. And your health and wellbeing is really our priority. This webinar will last approximately up to 1 hour with no breaks, and if at any point you need a break or to leave the webinar, please do remember that this is being recorded, and so you can always come back at a later date and pick up from where you left off, or in case you missed anything. So today we are going to cover the topics of self-confidence and relationships in this webinar. We will start by looking at what is self-confidence and understanding avoidance. We will then explore positive self-talk, followed by first impressions and values, and how these can impact our relationships. And finally, we will look at boundaries and managing rejection.
So it's over to me. So what does the research tell us? So people who are born with a cleft generally reported having good family relationships and friendships. But the findings also suggest that while adults feel really comfortable in their existing friendships, engaging in new friendships is something that many still find difficult. A survey of adults born with a cleft found that most people agreed with the following statements. I worry or have worried that I will never find someone, and I feel I lack confidence and experience when it comes to dating. While 67% of those surveyed were in a romantic relationship of some kind, self-perceived competence in romantic relationships and socially was lower in adults born with a cleft than the general population. Studies suggest that people born with a cleft may also be at risk of negative social experiences. Sadly, almost 85% of the people surveyed said they had experienced some form of bullying during their lifetime. And for some, this had a prolonged negative effect on their life and impacted their self-confidence and made them more socially anxious. There is a risk that these experiences then impact on future interactions and create a cycle of negative social interaction. The CLAPA Cleft Talk podcast does feature episodes on the topic of both friendships and romantic relationships, and sex, intimacy, and kissing.
So, what is self-confidence? Self-confidence and self-esteem do overlap, but they are different. Self-esteem is about how we feel deep down about who we are, which colours the information we receive and process about ourselves. There is a previous CLAPA webinar on self-esteem, which is available on our website and YouTube channel for you to see. Self-confidence, however, is linked with the external world, such as how others see us, how we present ourselves, and what we achieve. Self-confidence is about our belief in ourselves and our abilities, and can change depending on the situation. It's important to have a healthy amount of self-esteem in order to have the self-confidence to rise to challenges and take an active role in things we enjoy or find rewarding. It's quite normal to feel more confident in some circumstances and less confident in others. Some people may be particularly confident at work, but lack confidence in social relationships. You might have a large friendship circle, but lack confidence in romantic relationships. When someone is experiencing low self-confidence, they might appear to be lacking energy or drive, avoiding things that they want to do, or dodging tasks or situations, such as socializing or starting new relationships for a fear of negative judgment. Someone might want to build relationships, but finds it hard to take that first step. Low self-confidence has lots of similarities or traits with what might be recognised by a psychologist as social anxiety. So there are lots of different causes or possible causes of low self-confidence, and some possible factors could include bullying, employment issues, early environmental influences, and childhood influences. These could be some reasons why, but it's not always the case. So how does it feel to have low self-confidence? People might feel quite negative about themselves. They may feel shy or uneasy or inferior to others. And low self-confidence can influence all aspects of life.
Sorry, I was just having an issue with them unmuting. So when it comes to meeting new people, most of us feel nervous when we meet people for the first time, people that we don't know. And this can be in any context, new colleagues, starting a new job, family, within your social circles, or dating, for example. When people experience low self-confidence, it can be especially hard when they're meeting new people. Often we find that the thought and the anticipation of it is actually worse than the reality. But the risk that we run is that past experiences impact on our future interactions. So what this means is that if we've had a negative experience in the past, then we expect that future interactions might go badly. And so we can create a negative cycle of social interaction. So where we avoid going and doing new things because we're either expecting it to go badly or we've had those past experiences. And this can lead people to feel nervous, defensive, or embarrassed when meeting new people. So cognitive behavioural therapy, or CBT, this is a model that psychologists use to explain why meeting new people can be difficult. So it helps to explain a little bit about how our thoughts, our feelings, and our behaviours all interact. And this is another particular model that could be used to understand social anxiety. So as already mentioned, when we have negative past experiences, they impact on our future interactions as we predict that something is going to go badly. And that creates that self-fulfilling cycle. So, for example, someone might have the thought that this person might think I'm weird because I have a facial scar or because my voice sounds different. And this thought then leads in turn to physical bodily sensations, such as feeling sick in new situations, feeling anxious about seeing the person going out into a new environment. And then that in turn leads to behaviours such as avoidance. So we'll either avoid the situation, or we go into the situation and we're not making eye contact. We might be covering our scar with our hand or not talking. So this is, as I say, kind of informed by this model of cognitive behavioural therapy. If we think that others are judging us negatively, we're likely to act defensively. And then, as mentioned, we become withdrawn. And that behaviour then affects how other people behave towards us and how they react. If we are not making eye contact, or we're behaving in an anxious way, or we're not talking openly, people don't get a chance to get to know us and to enjoy that experience. It becomes an awkward social interaction, and that just reinforces that feeling that people don't want to be around us or to interact with us, and the vicious cycle continues.
So this avoidance is a natural human reaction to feeling anxious. We use avoidance in an attempt to prevent our fears from coming true and to feel more comfortable in situations that we're anxious about. For example, staying quiet in social situations or work meetings because of a fear that if you talk, someone might judge you for sounding different. Another example might be avoiding being in photos at social events because of a fear that someone will notice that you have a scar. Although natural, avoidance is problematic because whilst it may seem helpful because it reduces our anxiety in the short term, unfortunately, it keeps anxiety going in the longer term. Avoidance can stop us from testing if our fears or beliefs are actually true. It can also increase our self-focused attention. This takes our attention off the task at hand, so be that the work meeting or the social event, and instead our awareness becomes overly focused on ourselves, such as our thoughts about how we're feeling, which can then lead to further anxiety, as Catherine described in that cycle. Avoidance also perpetuates the negative thought cycle. For example, someone who has anxiety about a social event may act in a certain way by avoiding going to a party, which leads to the desired outcome of reducing your anxiety on that day or in the short term. But this positively reinforces the avoidance behaviour by making it more likely to reoccur when faced with the option of whether to go to a party or not in the future, as we've already had that short-term release from that. This can ultimately stop us from achieving our goals, such as making new friendships, making new relationships with work colleagues, or meeting a romantic partner. Avoidance can also feed into the feelings of low mood due to the isolation that comes with this. It can lead to limited experiences and opportunities in life, meaning that sometimes we have less to talk about socially. So, how can someone overcome avoidance and help themselves to take that first step? So, before going into a situation that you might have avoided previously or might be tempted to avoid, it can be helpful to engage in positive self-talk. So reminding yourself of all of your positive qualities can be really helpful. This was something that was covered in the previous self-esteem webinar when we looked at the positive qualities record. It might be useful to think about the things that are positive about you and the positive qualities that you have. Maybe you're a good cook, you're adventurous, you're reliable. Think about what you could say to yourself that would be helpful before going into a situation that you're feeling naturally anxious about and perhaps wanting to avoid in order to give yourself the confidence to be able to approach it. You could create some positive affirmations for yourself, such as, I know I am a fun person. I can be as confident as anyone else. So really reminding yourself about those positive qualities that you have. Now, having said all of that, it can be really difficult to identify our own positive qualities. So here are some questions which might help us in thinking about this. So, perhaps what would a friend say about you? What has someone commented on that you did well in the past? What would someone who is kind say about you? Maybe there's been positive feedback from something you did at work or from someone who knows you well. You could even actually go and ask someone if they have any positive qualities that they've noticed in you if you're struggling to come up with this yourself. And this can help us then to go into those situations that we might be feeling tempted to avoid.
So, an important note about first impressions. When we meet someone, the first thing that we notice is their appearance. This is because when we meet people for the first time, there's a lot of information that is available to us. So this is an evolutionary psychology approach to understanding that our brains have developed mechanisms to help us to avoid being overwhelmed, to help us to cope with new situations with lots of information. So we pick out key characteristics to enable us to decide in a quick way what the most appropriate way is to behave towards a person or in a situation. For example, are they a friend? Are they a foe? Is this a safe situation? So appearance is just a shortcut in that process. So often influential in the first 7 to 10 seconds of meeting another person. But after this, we start to notice other verbal and non-verbal cues, such as facial expression, tone of voice, movement, eye contact, gestures, posture. Those things quickly take over and often completely override the initial visual impression that we've created. So forming relationships, whether they're friendships, colleagues, romantic relationships, is about much more than judging how somebody looks. People will want to hear about you, and you will want to hear about them, much more than about what we first notice in terms of appearance. Successful relationships are built on reciprocity, so mutual respect and similarity in attitude and values. If someone judges someone solely on their appearance, what does that say about them? Is that someone that you would want to be around? So, communication and verbal and non-verbal cues are really important in forming our relationships. Good social skills can make socializing easier and more fun, whether this is on a date or at work or shopping in town. Improving social skills can really help someone to feel and look more confident when they're with other people. And often that might start off being something we're acting and into, and not necessarily something we fully believe or feel completely confident about to start with. So it can be helpful with that to be mindful of our body language and our talking skills. For example, are we talking too quickly? Do we need to slow down? Does our voice sound friendly? Are we standing or sitting with our shoulders back and our head up? If we look confident, people are more likely to respond to us positively. These are some possible things to think about when starting conversations. Smiling is very good for us, and even a partial smile really can help. It makes us feel better, and it shows others that we are confident, friendly, and approachable. If you can think about times when you've been in a situation and notice how other people act towards you, and the people that we're drawn towards are the people that are smiling and seem warm and approachable. If someone can't smile, they can use their energy and their enthusiasm when they talk to people instead. Eye contact can tell us lots about how people are feeling, about whether we're being listened to, whether we agree with what people are saying. It can also signal whether we like them or not. It's helpful with all of this to think about, what do you want someone's first impression of you to be? Perhaps just take a moment to just think about and reflect on this question. Try and think about other positive aspects of yourself, not just focused on your appearance. Maybe this could be something to remind yourself before a date or an interview or socializing with other people, with new people. Most importantly, remember that cleft is only one part of your identity.
So when thinking about those questions that Catherine's posed there, that can also be quite tricky to do sometimes. And identifying our values can be helpful in knowing ourselves and what we want those first impressions to be. Once we know our values, this can then feed into the relationships we want to develop and have. It might be helpful to think about asking yourself questions about who you are, who you want to be, and what you can do to help build on those values. For example, what sort of personal qualities do you have or want to have? How do you want to be towards others? What do you really want? And what do you stand for in life? If you're watching this after the live event online, you could pause this webinar now and write these down to really think about these questions. So, when specifically thinking about relationships, it can be really helpful to think about your values in relation to relationships. For example, what sort of relationships do you want to build? How do you want to behave in these relationships? What personal qualities do you want to develop as a product of being in these relationships? How would you treat others if you were the ideal you in those relationships? What sort of ongoing activities do you want to be doing with some of these people, be that new friends, work colleagues, or romantic partners? Notice that all of these questions are about you, how you would like to be, and what you can contribute to a relationship. This is really important, as the only aspect of any relationship that we have any control over is the way that you behave. The best way to influence someone is with your own actions. These actions will be most effective when they are aligned with your values. So ask yourself, if I did have the sort of partner or friends that I want, how would I behave towards them? What personal qualities would I like to bring to this relationship? If you have a clearer idea of who you want to be, you can be more confident about finding someone who matches this and matches these values. What is important to you within this relationship? It can be really helpful to think about the sort of partner or friends that you'd ideally like, and then you can set yourself a goal to go out and find them. However, in the meantime, you can make the most of whatever relationships you are in right now by practicing bringing your own values into play.
So, boundaries. It can be really helpful when we're thinking about these relationships that we want to create and that we're hopefully going to be engaging in, to think about what our boundaries are. So, what is a boundary? Boundaries are personal limits that define what we are willing to accept and what we are not. They set the parameters of our physical and emotional space, protecting our mental health and well-being. Boundaries can really help to define what someone is comfortable with and how someone would like to be treated by others. So this can take many forms, including saying no to unreasonable demands, limiting time spent with toxic people, or setting time aside for your own self-care. In essence, boundaries help us to create a healthy balance between our personal needs and the demands of the outside world. Without boundaries, we can feel overwhelmed, stressed, taken advantage of, and unable to manage our time and energy effectively. So they help to keep us safe. They help us to express to others what we think is acceptable or unacceptable. And they help us to express our needs in an assertive way, but not in an aggressive way. People with solid boundaries tend to have lower levels of stress and higher self-esteem. When we feel strong in ourselves, we tend to trust others more, and we're more discerning in who we choose to have as our friends. In turn, a person with healthy self-esteem tends to attract genuine respect and liking from others. So, although we can change our own thoughts and behaviours, as Lauren was saying, we cannot enforce a change on anyone else. Changes in the way that others think and behave may occur as they adjust their perception of us and recognise the way that we are making change in our lives. A safe or healthy relationship is one where someone is respected and they feel valued for who they are. It's where someone can openly share their thoughts and their feelings and feel supported and encouraged. Sadly, in the survey that was mentioned at the start, some adults born with a cleft said they'd entered into unhealthy relationships as they felt they would not be able to attract anyone more suitable. You can set boundaries on what you will and won't accept, and this applies to all relationships: friends, families, colleagues, employees. If the other person in any relationship is abusive or hostile or treating you badly in some way, or if you feel unsafe in any relationships, we are providing more information at the end of this webinar on who to contact for support. Boundaries are also important when it comes to talking about clefts. It's important to consider any boundaries someone may have or want to have around sharing their own experiences with their cleft before sharing this with someone else. This will help with their confidence. If someone chooses to share about their cleft, it can be more empowering if they have thought about how they will do that, such as the language or the wording that they're going to use when they're going to introduce that. It can be helpful to think about the timing of when someone might share. Would they bring that up themselves? Would they want the other person to bring it up? What would help them to feel more in control of that conversation? Someone could practice out loud how they would say it, such as in a mirror, in the car, with a friend or family member where they feel comfortable. They can also develop a toolkit to share about their cleft, such as a written summary and a childhood photograph. If this is challenging for anyone, then your cleft psychology team can help with thinking about that and going through that. If it feels that you haven't got somebody that you're close with that you're able to do that with, or they don't know how to support you with that.
So when doing a webinar on self-confidence and relationships, we think it's important to also speak about rejection in these relationships, as it is really normal to experience rejection and to feel low in response to the end of relationships, be that friendships or romantic relationships. We are evolutionary, that's a tongue twister, predisposed to be social creatures, and therefore that rejection is always going to feel really difficult. Sadly, rejection is always a possibility, and I'm sure most people you've met will have experienced unlucky situations in relationships and that rejection. So, what can you do to feel better if this does occur? So you can avoid rumination, which is the repetitive thoughts about that rejection, reminding yourself that it is normal and you will feel better. It's okay to be sad about that for some time, and reminding yourself that you will feel better. You could try to accept what has happened and then seek out positive relationships with friends and family, or distract yourself with a hobby or another enjoyable activity. You could recognize your positive qualities, as we spoke about earlier, and remind yourselves what other things are important to you, which would be drawing on those ideas from thinking about your values. You could also try to have compassionate thoughts about yourself. For example, thinking, what would a kind friend say? And practice some self-care, as it is going to be a difficult time, but there is some things that we can do to make it feel a little bit better. So, if we now take a pause to think about the different areas that we've covered today, when pulling everything together, we can see that we can start to influence that negative cycle that we saw at the beginning. As you can see in this cycle, which hopefully depicts a more positive version, we've had a little think about how we can change those thoughts by encouraging that positive self-talk and that compassionate voice. Unfortunately, there's not much we can do to change those physical sensations, and we hope that that can be influenced by changing our thoughts and also some of those changes in our behaviours. But we hope that by having those more self-compassionate and positive self-talk thoughts, it would help us to feel more relaxed going into a situation. We can never say that we're going to feel 100% relaxed going into a situation that typically makes us anxious, but it might just help to feel more relaxed going into that. We can then look at how we've spoken about having some influence over those behaviours. Essentially, these behaviours are avoiding that avoidance that we saw in the initial negative cycle. So making eye contact, thinking about our posture, smiling, as Catherine was saying, about the warmness when we meet people, asking questions, and also having something prepared about when we want to talk about clefts and how that can then give us the confidence to go into this situation. We can then see how each of these elements will influence each other to be able to create a more positive cycle. So, as is probably quite clear, lots of those things can take lots of time to be able to do. And by no means do we expect that after a 30-minute webinar, all of those parts of the cycle will be totally changed for everybody. So If any of the topics that we've covered today have affected you and you feel you need further support, please do contact your GP, speak with your local NHS Cleft team and your Cleft clinical psychology team, contact CLAPA on adults@clapa.com, or reach out to CLAPA services, including peer support and counselling. And more information can be found on the website clapa.com/support/adults.
We hope you found this webinar useful. This is the second in a psychoeducational series that CLAPA are developing. We would like you to know where to find support if you need it. And as Lauren's already mentioned, some people you can speak to, but we also wanted to include some websites and links to helpful information if you are struggling or would like to know more. As Lauren mentioned, you can access talking therapies through the NHS and Changing Faces, through the Cleft Team psychologists, and also CLAPA counselling. We've also included the details on here for the Samaritans, as well as refuge and domestic abuse help. This webinar has been developed with information, support and input from the following, and we would like to say a big thank you to Lauren, Anna and Catherine for all their help and support and time this evening, as well as Anne and Helen for their support behind the scenes. To the National Lottery Community Fund for their funding and making this possible, and to Face IT, Changing Faces and the CCI.
So I think now we're going to go to any questions that we have from this evening. So if you've got any, please pop them in the chat and message them over to Gillian. To start us off, I've got one here that says, what can the Cleft team do to help me with my self-confidence?
Sorry, thank you. Yeah, I mean, as we sort of indicated, that the access to the Cleft Team psychology is something that is available on an ongoing basis. So although your kind of routine cleft care often ends when you reach adulthood, you are able to return to see the teams. So you can, if you're still in contact with the team, if you're still having kind of ongoing treatment, you can obviously ask for that, or you can go to your GP and ask for a referral back into the Cleft team. And in terms of kind of what they would do, we can offer psychological therapy. So sometimes that is about developing self-esteem or self-confidence, thinking about all the things we've spoken about today. And they're all great strategies, but sometimes we do need a bit of help and support with that. And I think often, especially if we've had a lot of negative experiences, sometimes being able to process some of that and make sense of some of that can really help with then being able to start thinking about having the confidence to go back into social experiences. I think it's really important or can be helpful to remember that a lot of the time our negative experiences are linked to school and to those kind of times when everybody at school is trying to find themselves and cope with identity and fitting in and all of those things. And anyone that has something that makes them different can make them more likely to be on the outside of a group, which enables other people to stay on the inside of a group. And hopefully a lot of those experiences are lesser as you get older, and you can choose the environments that you go into. People are more mature, people are less insecure, so aren't finding the need to project that onto other people. So it's, you often, the kind of, as we've said in the webinar today, that some of that damage is done, and you're really affected by how that's changed your confidence and how you view yourself. So trying to think about if there's social groups where you can meet people with like-minded interests, and go with somebody that you do have a close relationship with and feel safe with, that can help you to kind of just take those first steps into going into those in those different environments. So just being able to help you to think about what those steps might be when you're feeling really stuck with it and it feels overwhelming, and that it's not possible to see how things could be different.
Okay, yeah, thank you. I've got another question here that says, I would like to explain my cleft lip to my work colleagues. I'm unsure of how to start. Where do I start?
I think this one of the things that we spoke about a bit in the previous webinar, so it might be useful to sort of revisit that. But as we were sort of saying when we're talking about kind of boundaries and thinking about what feels safe and comfortable for you, I think it is being able to think about the different environments and how much you want to share, and then having a way of rehearsing and practicing an answer. So Changing Faces website has got some really useful resources, and one of the things that they talk about is the explain, reassure, distract technique. So in essence, that's thinking about why people are curious, why people what they need when we want to explain something to them. So the explanation part is to deal with that curiousness, that nosiness. So having a simple explanation about what it is that makes you different and how that might affect things. The reassurance is because sometimes people are anxious or worried, whether that's something that hurts or that you're affected by. And then the distraction part is kind of saying, taking control of that conversation and saying, that's all I want to say about that. Can we move on to something else now? So, in a work scenario, it might be, I was born with a cleft, and that's, a gap in the roof of my mouth, or that's a gap in my lip, however that's affected you. And, it's all healed now. It doesn't affect me. And then, what have I missed? Or can you tell me about where the coffee room is? Or, whatever it is, something which switches that back. And again, does that part of explaining that the cleft is just a small part of who you are, like being able to switch it on to talking about other aspects about you or about how you are in the workplace. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, no, that's helpful. And then I have a couple of other questions here. One says, I'm unhappy with the way I look. What can I do about this? They're talking about body image, appearance-based concerns, but also like psychologically, and maybe help from the Cleft Team psychology.
Yeah, I mean, I think linking into sort of the first question, obviously there's lots around psychological and emotional support around thinking about the relationship that we have with ourselves, about how we view ourselves, how we expect other people to view us. And there can obviously within the Cleft team as well, there is the possibility of meeting with the kind of surgical team as well, if it feels that there's something that it might be sort of functionally having an impact and important to think about addressing, or something that somebody really is unhappy with that might be possible to have some surgery to look at. I think the really important thing is seeing the team together for those things, because often there can be, like we're saying, where the cleft can become such an important part, and we go to these clinic appointments for years and years and years, and some part of our anatomy is analysed in that level of detail. We become so focused on it that even after surgery, it's really hard to shift that, for it not to be something that we remain really, really self-conscious about. And so sometimes surgery isn't the answer, and surgery won't change our self-confidence and our self-esteem. We might feel more comfortable going into a social environment. We might think that there's less focused attention on us, but most of the time we still are incredibly self-conscious about that part of our body that we've spent all those years focusing on. And so without any psychological support around that, it's really unlikely that surgery on its own is going to significantly shift our relationship with ourselves, with our body image, and feeling comfortable and okay. So that would be my suggestion, like absolutely go and explore things and find out what's possible, but remembering that our relationship with ourselves and how we see ourselves is much more important than any surgery.
Yeah, no, thank you. That's very true. I have a bit more of a technical question. Will a recording of this Zoom call be available, and where are the podcasts located?
Yes, that's probably one for me. So first of all, podcasts. So it's the Cleft Talk podcast. I think there's about 20 episodes of that currently. You can find that on Spotify and I think on Apple for your podcasts. If you just type it in on Google, it'll probably come up on the CLAPA website as well. So sometimes the best thing is just type CLAPA Cleft Talk podcast, and you'll get all the episodes on there, so you can listen to those. And some of them you can watch as well. They were filmed at the same time, but there's really good content on there, so please do check them out. And yes, tonight's is being recorded, so we will then be putting this on our website over the next couple of weeks, and then on our YouTube channel as well. And we'll send you an email when it's gone live, so that you can come back and watch what you want to again, or revisit any of the things, because we realise it's a lot of information in a short period of time, and actually, it really is designed for people to come back to as and when they need to, really. So hopefully that answers that one, Anna.
Yeah, no, perfect. Thank you. And then I think I have just one or two more here. So, what is the difference between self-esteem and self-confidence?
I don't know.
No volunteers on this one.
I didn't know Lauren once, because I know she spoke to that in
the mute
first
button
slide.
Catherine, you take it away.
So it's they're very much are kind of overlapping concepts. So as we sort of explained kind of at the start, self-esteem is kind of our internal view of ourselves, and how we feel about ourselves, and then self-confidence is how that's portrayed kind of to the outside world. So obviously, if we don't have good self-esteem, that's going to affect our self-confidence, but actually you'll probably can think of times either yourself or people that you know, where they might come across as incredibly self-confident people, but actually have their self-esteem and is a lot lower, and we see that with lots of celebrities and things like that, with mental health difficulties, where they come across and like I'm thinking of someone like Robin Williams, who incredibly vivacious individual who then had lots of difficulties actually still believing that they were kind of a worthwhile individual. So it's really important to think about both. But self-confidence is, if we can't have that self-confidence, that's what really affects our ability to build relationships with others, because that is the bit that draws people in, how we kind of behave in those social interactions with other people, being warm, being the things we've spoken about today, approachable, open, and I think with that it's really lots of the things we've spoken about today, but particularly asking people questions. Most people really enjoy talking about themselves, really enjoy being asked about themselves, enjoy being listened to, being heard. We often have the kind of, oh, how are you? But then people have moved on before you've even started answering the question. So not underestimating kind of how much, if we're really anxious and we don't want to talk about ourselves, or we're struggling in that environment, just opening that up and allowing other people to take some of that space up, whilst we're just getting used to being in those social interactions.
Definitely. I was also going to add, I think, kind of a rule of thumb way to differentiate them is you can almost fake self-confidence, bit of a fake it till you make it thing, but it's much, much harder to fake having self-esteem, as that is something that is internal and your belief about yourself. And there's also the self-esteem webinar that you can have a look at to see a lot more about self-esteem and how that can be encouraged.
Perfect, thanks guys. And then I've got one more question here. So they say a little slightly off topic, but I often feel quite conscious about my speech. Do you know, is it possible to improve or change our speech as we get older? Thanks.
Yeah. Oh, go.
No, I was certainly going to say, from my experience working in the Cleft team, it's definitely something that can be considered within the team, within the speech and language team, which hopefully you'll have connection with within your Cleft team, that you hopefully have a connection with there. And they will be able to support with anything that could be done through speech therapy. Obviously, we don't know everything about this, but there's also other options to improve speech that could be surgical. But I think speaking to your Cleft team first is what I think is definitely encouraged to do, if possible. Hope that's agreed with Catherine.
Yeah, definitely. And it is difficult because it's individual, and I think sometimes there's certain things that become habit, that we sort of develop when we've had to deal with difficulties with speech, and sometimes they can be quite it can be quite challenging to change some of those things. Some of those things are, as Lauren's kind of saying, structural, and there may be some surgical options and maybe some speech therapy options, but sometimes again, it comes back to what the answer to the previous question, that sometimes it's about our self-focus on something, and actually it's much more noticeable to us than it is to other people. And again, even if it does impact on our speech and how much people can understand us, coming at it with that warmth and that the openness and all of those things, rather than the avoidance, can really enable somebody to want to listen, to want to understand, and to still be able to kind of build those relationships with other people. So yeah, trying to, as much as possible, because when we self-focus, then we get anxious, and then we're more likely that our speech we might speak faster, and then it'd be less understandable to others, and all of those things that can actually, again, therapy might be able to help you think about how to manage those, but also psychology might be able to help to think about some strategies to manage in those situations, to make your speech as clear as possible. And yeah.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And then I think I have one question here, but guys, if you have any more questions, please do keep on sending them in. But I have one here that says, I have never had a relationship before, and I'm used to feeling a little bit of rejection. I'm slightly worried that I'll never meet someone. Which is totally understandable.
Yeah, and I think kind of touched upon in the webinar today, that it is that those experiences of rejection are going to happen, and they happen across the board. That, you know, if we sort of think about the amount of people that we meet in the course of our lifetime, and then how many relationships we have, whether those are kind of intimate relationships, friendships, there's a lot of people that we meet that are not going to be the one, or it's not going to be an enduring kind of relationship. So those experiences, being able to cope with and put ourselves out there and risk having those negative or difficult experiences, is essential to meet to meet people, or to have those relationships that feel different to that. So it's I can't sort of promise that you are going to meet somebody or who that person will be, but I think thinking about all of those things, what relationships do you want, what first impressions do you want to have, who do you want to allow into your life, what are you kind of putting out into the world, being able to go out and be warm, to think about your interests, and going into environments where you're going to meet like-minded people that share those interests and passions and values and ways of living, are much more likely to meet somebody if you kind of have all of those things there. There's lots of information, again, referring to the Changing Faces website. So they've got lots of things on there. And I think the sort of peer support that you can get through there, through CLAPA, can be really helpful as well to for people that have gone through that process of feeling that they're never going to meet anybody, and they're too anxious to put themselves into those environments, but then have gone on to meet someone and to have that bravery in those social interactions and relationships. So hopefully having that peer feedback, because I can kind of sit here and say from my professional experience, but sometimes it's a lot more believable if it's somebody that has that lived experience that's saying, yeah, I've been there, and it is possible.
Yeah, no, that's so true. Thank you so much. So I think we'll move on now, guys. If you are interested in reading more, here are some articles which have provided much of the content of tonight's webinar. And this list will be available to access once the recording is live on our website as well. Yeah, so thank you all for attending, and those to you watching it back at a later date as well. We hope it has been informative and a really helpful session. And please do use the QR code on this slide or the link in the follow-up email to provide your feedback. Also, do get in touch through adults@clapa.com with any queries or if you are in need of any support. Thank you very much and good night.